Welcome everybody to the pilot edition of Wade's Wild World of Sport. It is Wednesday, July 20th, 2011. I am Dando, one half of the Michael and Dando Show, and I am joined on the line by one of, if not the best young AFL reporters in Victoria, Mr. Nick Wade of the Geelong Advertiser. Nick, how are you?
G'day Dando, that's a fair rap, but I don't think I can take credit for that quite yet, but no, thanks for the nice introduction anyway.
Oh, well, you've been on our show a few times, you know you're good.
No, I remember we had a chat last year, didn't we, on the way back from the grand final?
Yeah, that was good.
One of those grand finals, there was a bit of shenanigans in the car on the way back, and I had a few people trying to put me off, so, it's been a bit of a fun ride, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has been. For those of you listening, Wade's World of Sport is going to be pretty much just a recap of the news in AFL of the week. I'm going to ask Nick a few questions, but before we get into that, I thought I might allow Nick to give you all a little insight as to who he is, what he does, and how he got into reporting.
All right, thanks, mate. Yeah, pretty quickly, I went to school at Western Heights, then went to Deakin Uni, and did a bit of journal and media work with Dando there, and been at the Addy for a couple of years now. Started covering local footy, and then the last 2 years sort of progressed to full-time sports, so covering AFL and the Cats and all the day-to-day grind work that you have to do on the sports desk, but it's good fun, and you get to travel around Australia to see footy, and certainly it's good to combine your passion for a profession, which is what I'm doing with sport and writing, so I'm enjoying it, mate.
Where do you hope to see yourself in 10 years?
Oh, look, I think the whole media landscape is changing. There's a lot more stuff online and a lot more emphasis on instant media, so I guess I'll have to wait and see in 10 years' time, mate. It might look completely different, but obviously try and get as far as you can, I reckon. All
right, well, we might get into the questions.
That's far away. Let's
All right,
pick up for me.
All right, I'm starting off with a topic that's been beaten to death already in the media, but it's Favola, right? He had a great performance last week in the VFL, kicked 11 goals. So do you think there's any chance of him playing in the AFL again, and if so, for what team?
Yeah, look, I don't think there is. I know 11 goals was a pretty good performance, but we've got to remember he was playing against Frankston, and Frankston are a really, really poor VFL side this year. I had a look at some highlights of his performance on the weekend, and a lot of the times it was a pretty open forward line, and they were isolating him, and a player of his ability should be kicking that many goals when he hasn't got that much pressure. But then again, you've still got to be able to kick those goals. No doubt he's got the talent, but I just can't see a club taking a risk with him. He's in his early 30s now. Maybe the Bulldogs, if they decide to go down that path, but they've had the ill-fated Ackermanis experiment, and maybe Greater Western Sydney if they want one or 2 years out of a bloke who might give them a forward structure, but I don't think they should be going down that path. They should be looking at kids. So, yeah, I struggle to see him come back from here, but hopefully for his sake, he can maybe string together another 50 or 60 goals for the rest of the year and prove to the football world that he has got 1 year left in him.
Do you think Michael Voss is kicking himself that he signed on Favola in the first place?
I think in hindsight, yeah. I think we've sort of realised it was a pretty bad decision, and they made a few sort of poor recruiting mistakes, I guess, 2 years ago. And at the end of 2009, I think they thought their window was open, and they topped up with Favola, and they got a few recycled players, spent a lot of money in the salary cap, and as a result, they went the other way. They went down to the bottom, and they lost some really good players. Riscatelli, he's gone to Gold Coast, obviously, because they had better money. Brennan went as well, but it was good to see Daniel Rich commit this week to Brisbane and stay there. So hopefully the tide's turning. And they were pretty good against the Cats last week, so he's playing the kids and got them playing a nice, good sort of contested brand of footy. So there's a long way to go for them, but I think they've turned the right direction anyway.
Yeah, they have. Just getting back to Favola once more, Geelong don't seem to have much of a solid forward structure. Do you think any chance of him playing for Geelong?
No, I think you look at the Cats forward line, and Mooney's obviously he's playing his last year. He'll be gone. Podsiadler will be 30, 31 next year, so he's getting on. It's an older forward line. You don't want another old guy in there, particularly when it could compromise the development of a Nathan Vardy, who's 19, 20, Tom Hawkins, who's 22, turning 23. I think next year Hawkins should be given that extra responsibility to basically control the forward line. I've still got a lot of faith in him. I think he'll be a really good player once he gets that confidence in him. And you've got to remember, he's only 22, so he's got a lot of development left in him. But I really like Nathan Vardy, and I think the last thing you want to do is throw an older guy in there who could potentially set the club back a couple of years in development of these kids, because I think Chris Scott's mantra has always been to bring the kids in and give them opportunity. And, yeah, you don't want to get someone like a Favola who could unsettle the apple cart there, I guess.
Well, I'm glad you brought up before last week's game against Geelong for the Brisbane Lions, because I'm going to speak about Jonathan Brown now. He's easily one of the best players in the league, unquestionably. But do you think he should consider an early retirement to prevent any further injury or any possible brain damage as a result of the face smash from last week?
Yeah, It's a good question you raised. I don't think he'd like to retire too early, but we saw earlier in the year that concussions were brought on the agenda, particularly when Jimmy Bartell got smashed around a bit, and Stevens from Adelaide had to retire because he had sort of ongoing brain damage as a result of concussion. I think that it's just his kamikaze style, that the way he plays, he's always going to present that sort of an issue. And I think I heard, might have been Brad Scott on the TV the other night, he said he was more concerned about the safety of Alistair Lynch and Daniel Bradshaw in that forward line, because Brown often went so hard he injured other people when he was running back and not looking where he was going. But I think he's had a rotten run of luck this year, two facial injuries in the same spot, and I think maybe he might need to reassess just his sort of presence when he's out there and go, look, should I really be going for that? Because clearly he's a superstar, but you know, he's spending more time off the ground than on at the moment.
That's not good. He's a great guy too.
No, he certainly is. You know, we love that sort of guy. You know, he's always up for a chat, and yeah, like he's good to have in the game as well. Good local boy, come from the Falcons, and you know, has been I think a triple premiership player at Brisbane, and you know, he's getting towards the end of his career. But you know, you don't want to see players like that retire prematurely unless they absolutely have to.
Well, another player who has an injury at the moment is Brett Harvey, got an injured finger. And last week we saw one of the, I think it was the Bulldogs players, attempting to attack the already injured finger of Brett Harvey. What can the AFL do to prevent this from occurring? Because it probably happens more often than most people think.
Yeah, I think my opinion on this is, even if you are carrying an injury, if you take that into a game and you stand out in the middle of the ground, you're fair game. You're saying, hey guys, I'm fit to play. And I think that, you know, if it happens that a bloke tries to target it, you know, that's fair game. There are rules in place to make sure that there's nothing untoward. I think happened last year with the Stephen Baker incident with Steve Johnson when Baker got 9 weeks. There was a lot of prodding because Johnson had a broken hand. But the issue was there that Johnson broke it in the actual game, and he was still out there, and that was deliberately targeting an injury that had just occurred. Whereas with Brent Harvey, he took it into the game. So he said, I'm fit. It's the same with a bloke who injures a shoulder the week before, comes back, it's heavily strapped. He's fair game as well. So, you know, you don't like to see it, but if a player puts himself out there, I think he's got to be exposed to the risks that, you know, opposition teams will try and get an edge in any way. And if that's trying to unsettle a bloke who's carrying an injury, then sometimes they do it.
Well, that's the answer I wasn't expecting, but it's pretty fair, I must say. Do you think it was fair, the penalty that was given to Shaw for his gambling?
I thought it was pretty good. I think that it's the integrity of the game's at stake here, and it's a really strong message the AFL set. There was no consequence on the game, so it didn't affect it at all. It wasn't like something we saw over in Pakistan with the cricket. I think any time you have a chance to stamp out any form of insider information or gambling on the game, it's a good thing, and I don't think you'll see too many players being silly enough to even contemplate betting on themselves or their teammates. I mean, it was very small what he did, but if he gets away with that, then it progresses to $20, then it progresses to a bit more, and then it progresses to bets that actually influence the game. And yeah, I think they've made a really strong stand, as they historically have done. So I think the AFL did a good job there.
What do you think may have happened had Maxwell kicked the first goal?
I think it would have been a lot bigger sanction. It would have been a lot more questions asked, for sure. But luckily he didn't, I think, for Shaw's sake, because, yeah, like we'd be probably talking about a whole completely different issue now.
On the topic of Collingwood too, the Malthouse-Buckley scenario, I'm a little out of the loop with the whole situation. I just know that Malthouse will no longer be coaching at the end of the year and Buckley will be next year. Does that seem a bit crazy to you that a possible premiership coach will be out of a job in the same year?
It's amazing, isn't it? They signed off on this 2 years ago where Mick Malthouse... Collingwood didn't want to lose Nathan Buckley to another club, so they drafted up this sort of succession plan, which sort of meant that we'll keep Buckley, but we'll also be able to send Mick Malthouse out on what should have been a really positive note. But what's happened since, and I don't think they would have forecast this, is Collingwood's had this really unprecedented dominance over the last couple of years, and Mick Malthouse, who might have agreed to something 2 years ago, is suddenly having a bit of buyer's remorse where he's gone, oh, well, I wish I didn't sign that now because I'm coaching the best I ever have. I've developed this team from the bottom up, and you know, there's a couple of years left in me as a good coach. I think he said that a couple of years ago when he agreed to this succession plan that he might have done it with a bit of sort of a few personal problems in his life. I think he had a sick grandson. I think maybe something to do with his mother or someone else in his family as well. And he just sort of thought, oh, let's get that out of the way so I don't have to deal with my future. But at the end of the day, they've had a really good run since. And I think he'd love to coach on next year. And unfortunately for him, he's not going to be doing that at Collingwood, and that's why we're debating whether he goes to other clubs as well or whether there's tension at Collingwood. I don't think it's a really good backdrop to have over their season, but they've signed to it and they've got to work through it.
You don't think if Collingwood win the grand final and he decides that he'd like to coach next year, do you think Buckley will step down and allow him to do so? Or?
No, I've thought that at times, but no one's really been discussing it. I think a contract's a contract as far as Buckley's concerned, and he'll be coaching regardless next year of anything. The issue here is whether Mick decides to take on a job at another club. But Eddie Maguire's come out and said, look, no, he'll either be at Collingwood next year as his director of coaching or he won't be anywhere. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens at the end of the year. And it'll be really interesting, particularly if clubs such as Melbourne look for a new coach or whatnot, because if Mick Muller is sitting on the couch watching footy with a passion of coaching, it would be silly for him not to entertain an offer from another club.
So is Eddie going on just a verbal agreement that Mulhouse will not go to another club?
It's pretty much signed into the agreement that he'll be the director of coaching next year. But of course, you can always break a contract, can't you? That'll be quite tense, though, I think, if Mick said, look, I'm going to break this contract and go somewhere else. But then again, Eddie Maguire would be fighting very hard for Mick not to go anywhere else, because you look at, say, Mark Thompson at Essendon this year, he was able to provide inside information about Geelong to Essendon that actually allowed the Bombers to beat the Cats a few weeks ago. So the last thing Eddie Maguire's going to want is for Mick Muller to take all Collingwood's trade secrets to another club and then potentially sort of hatch a plan that helps bring the Magpies down. So that's another reason why he doesn't want him anywhere else next year.
Do you think Geelong can simply blame Mark Thompson being the assistant coach of Essendon as to the reason they lost?
Certainly not the main reason. They've also got Brendan McCartney there as an assistant, so they've got two guys who built Geelong to where they are now. McCartney and Thompson both started the Cats in 2000, so they're at the Cats for 11 years. And they both went to Essendon this year, and of course, they know all the Cats players inside out. So they would have been able to provide a bit of extra information to Essendon, stuff that maybe not a lot of other clubs would have known. So maybe little weaknesses about players, what they don't like. And at the end of the day, some of the things they did proved influential in the game. They put a man on Scarlett, and Scarlett was ineffective that game. That they made sure that all the Geelong defenders were manned up. They put lots of pressure on the Cats' defence, and at the end of the day, all those things added up to a really close win to Essendon. So I think, full credit to the Bombers for doing that, and I think James Hird has admitted since that extra information did help them beat the Cats that night.
Well, a month ago, Geelong, even to me, seemed like they could very well win the premiership and still can. But the past month, they haven't been performing like too flash at all. What do you think's contributed to this, and do you think the losses have done them any good?
I think the losses have done them good for sure. It's been a bit of a wake-up call to them, I think, because you look at their games, I think they've been behind this year in 9 games at quarter time, which shows they're not starting well, and they've come back to win 7 of those. So they've only been playing half of footy, and they've been able to win games, and some of their players have been down. But I think what we know is this team hates losing. So if they're within striking range at any time of the game, they're going to come back and really challenge for the win. The thing is, though, you don't want to be 4 or 5 goals behind in a final. I've got no doubt the Cats are going to win enough games to finish top 2. But you don't want to concede 4 goals to Collingwood in the first quarter in a final and play catch-up, because it's going to be very hard to reel in. So I think the main thing between now and the finals is Geelong just playing consistent footy, getting the good players in form, and then being in a position to really challenge Collingwood and the likes at the latter end of the season.
Well, before we wrap it up today, one last question. Who will not be playing for Geelong next year?
It's a good one. I don't think you'll see Mark Blake there next year, to be honest. He's out of contract at the end of the season. He's been out for around about 8 or 9 weeks now with a broken hand. He had a finger tendon, He had to get that sort of fixed. He's going to come back for the last couple of weeks of the VFL season. But I think the way the sub-rule's gone this year, he's sort of been a bit out of favour at the Cats, and then he got injured mid-year and then realised that he wasn't in senior selection, so he went to have this operation. He won't be there next year. I think we'll probably see Milburn retire. On the weekend, he wasn't viewed in their best 22, I don't think, because he was fit to play. He was named an emergency but wasn't selected. So he's someone who, again, has been a legend of the club, dual premiership player, I think, 34 years old. Time to retire. Mooney won't be there next year. He's going to retire. And I don't know about someone like a David Wojcinski. People tend to forget how old he is. He might retire at the end of the year as well. I think he's in his early 30s. He's been there since 1999, so it could be almost time for him to hang up the boots if he wants, and I guess we'll have to wait and see on some other players as well. Marcus Drum, I don't think will be there purely through a rotten run with injury. He was meant to play in the VFL on the weekend in his comeback game, but he injured himself at training, so he can't take a trick. So I think injuries have conspired against a few Cats this year.
Well, everybody, if you've enjoyed this show, let us know. We'd love to hear your feedback by either commenting on this video or emailing me at brendando@live.com.au. And if you have any questions you'd like Nick to answer on the show, be sure to email them through. I'll get him to answer them on the next show. Thanks again for your time, Nick.
No worries. Pleasure to be on.
Catch you later, mate.
See ya.